In this series of videos, we're going to take a look at PXT-General, which is our new application for Ableton Push that allows Push to be used in more meaningful ways with software other than just Ableton Live. And it also makes Push's user mode more flexible for use within Live. Before we get into the feature set of PXT-General, let's first take a look at the deficiencies of using Push with software other than Live, and also the deficiencies of using user mode within Live. In this example, I'm using Reaper. And the first thing to notice is the layout of the pads. These are strictly chromatic, alright, so we have no scales and no alternate layouts as we would when using Push with Live. And secondly, there's no LED feedback from the pads. Now with Reaper, there's somewhat of a unique feature that allows you to enable feedback. Right? But again, this is somewhat of a unique feature. You're not going to find this in every DAW. The second thing to notice is that the touch strip is touch sensitive. This means that it sends a note message when you press it. In other words, I can't bend a note without also playing the note that the touch strip sends. The next thing to notice is that all the buttons on the controller send control change messages momentarily, meaning they send an on message when you press them and an off message when you release them. And this is really not ideal for controlling a variety of parameters in software. To give you an example of this, I've set up a few mappings in Reaper. First, I've mapped the play button, and this properly starts playback when I press it. Next, I've mapped the record button, and this doesn't work properly. Record is only activated while I'm holding the record button down. Likewise, I've also set up a mute button, and again, mute is only active when I'm holding the button down. The last thing to notice is the encoders. Just like the touch strip, they're touch sensitive, so when you touch them, they send a note. If you have an instrument armed, they'll be triggering that instrument. You could see that in the level meters in Reaper here. In this example, I'm using user mode with Live. In case you're not aware, you can switch to user mode by pressing the user button. Now here, the issue that we talked about with the layout of the pads is a non-issue, because we can always switch to Push's default mode to play instruments. But the problem with the buttons remains. A play mapping works correctly, the record mapping doesn't work correctly, and mute mapping doesn't work correctly. Fortunately though, we have the option of using the pads for MIDI mapping, and these actually work correctly. Here I've mapped the pad to a mute switch, and that toggles the mute status correctly. However, there's another problem with this. As you can see right now, this LED is turned on. If I switch out of user mode and then back into user mode, that LED and all of the LEDs on the controller are turned off. Alright, this is because user mode doesn't internally store LED states, it just turns them off when you switch to user mode. PXT-General fixes all these deficiencies and more. If we go back to Reaper, first you'll notice that the pad layout here is the same as the pad layout that we would have in Live. The touch strip no longer sends a note when you press it, record and mute mappings work as they should, and the encoders no longer send notes when you press them. In Live, the record and mute mapping now work like they should, and also when switching back to user mode, the LED states are recalled correctly.